So quite some time ago, I did a video on my empty studio flat. I'm no longer there. I moved to another studio flat, but I'm still in London. I have lived in London my entire life, and I know how the housing system works here. So here are my 2 cents on how to get a studio flat in London. So there are going to be 4 main avenues that you can go down. You can go with a private landlord. You can go with the council, a housing association, or through letting agencies. Now, let me just break down each of those options for you. The timestamps will be in the video description or in the comments, so feel free to just go there if you know what avenue you want to go down and you just want some tips about the process and how it works. So let's kick off with private landlords. Private landlords are basically the owners of the property. They let out and rent the property directly to their tenants. There is no middleman, there is no letting agency, there's no one else to deal with. It is just the landlord upfront and directly. And the great reason to go for this is that you won't pay any hefty fees. You'll just pay a deposit and 1 month's rent upfront. Some landlords might be absolutely ridiculous and ask you for 6 months in advance or even 12 months in advance. But that's only because of the current market that we're in and the shortage of housing. Like, things have really changed and taken a turn since 2020 or 2021. The market in 2023, you know, if you thought it was competitive years ago, it's even worse now. So when things get worse, some landlords might try and take advantage of it, or they might be in an unstable situation themselves where they need guaranteed rent. So the way that they might do it is to ask for the rent upfront. I would say to avoid this unless you genuinely have the money and you don't mind paying something like 6k upfront or 10,000 upfront, and you know that you're going to be staying in the property for the long term or for the period of time that you pay for. To find a studio flat with a private landlord, all you need to do is head on over to websites such as openrent. Openrent is the most well-known site for properties with private landlords. They have a great filter option, so you can filter out what you are looking for, what you need, what you don't need. And in this case, all you would do is select that you're looking for a studio, you're looking for it to be in whatever your price range is, and you're looking for it to be in London, of course. You click on the search button and you are presented with an array of options, and all you have to do is find a few properties that you like. Don't just message one, message all of them. So find all of the options that you are interested in and message all of them with the same message. So draft up a short and brief message stating your name, what you're looking for, when you can move in, and asking them for a viewing. When you do this, it gives the landlord a bit of information about yourself, because they're going to have literally hundreds and hundreds of inquiries asking for the same thing. There are going to be a lot of people wanting to view the property too. So it really is a numbers game with this. But all you can do is write a decent, short initial message and hope for the best. When 48 hours have passed and you haven't heard back from the landlord, you can also chase them up for a response. And what this does is this notifies them. So openrent will notify the landlord that they need to respond to your message. I'm not sure what message openrent send the landlord, but I think it's quite an urgent one, because when I've used openrent, I've always got a response every single time when I've chased up the landlord. So overall, I would say openrent is an amazing option for anyone, whether you're employed or unemployed, or if you're on benefits, because there is a little option in the filter section where you can select properties that accept DSS, because not all properties select DSS. And I'm hoping that will change, because there are multiple reasons why private landlords won't accept people on benefits or universal credit. And it's quite a lot to go into, but just to touch on it, there is this idea that people who are in receipt of government benefits aren't going to be the kind of tenant that they want. And this is partly true, but it's also a misconception, because everyone is different. You know, there are different reasons as to why people are on benefits. There are people who have been on benefits their entire life. and it might be because they have a medical health condition that doesn't even allow them to work, so they're put into a situation where they have to claim benefits and that is their only option. And then there are people who you call them scroungers, who have basically been on benefits for a very long time, and they've been going to the job centre, you know, doing what they need to get their benefits basically, and you know, they're not really doing much with their life. Some people may have come from difficult situations such as abusive households, domestic violence, they might be drug users, they might have mental health conditions. Again, that kind of links back to the health conditions reason. But there are so many different reasons as to why someone would end up on benefits. And I think to have a whole, you know, blanket idea about everyone who is on benefits, it's obviously not fair, but that's the current society that we live in right now. And years ago, things were literally the opposite. Like, benefits were something that private landlords welcomed, because I think years ago the payments used to go directly to the landlord, and now they go directly to the tenant to pay to the landlord. And some tenants, unfortunately, they might take that money and not pay the landlord, and because, you know, once you've got burnt once, you're not going to want to go there again. It's extremely disappointing from the landlord's perspective when a tenant doesn't pay their rent, and you know they have the money, you know that they are in receipt of their benefits and they're getting the right amount to pay it, but they're just holding it to themselves. So I can understand that no one wants to go through that, right? But then of course you have the people who are in receipt of benefits who were working and they were made redundant, and they can't find a job because the job market in London, you know, it's up and down, it fluctuates, and it depends on what industry they're in. But if they're in a really niche industry, they're kind of fucked as well. So I say all of this to say that there are so many different reasons why someone would find themselves in that situation of having to claim benefits. And if you are that kind of person, I would advise you to strictly stick to open rent, because open rent, you know, is run by private landlords only. Of course, there are some letting agencies on there, but for the most part it's going to be private landlords. And that brings me to the second option of letting agencies. You can find letting agencies and estate agents literally everywhere in London. They're on every street corner. You can walk in, have a look at their portfolio if you want to, but come on, this is the digital age that we're in. It's a very fast-paced world. If you walk into letting agencies, have a look at the properties that they have on their portfolio, go for reviewing, you know, the chance that like 100 other people made inquiries on the property and they did it online is very high. So I would recommend just stick to online digital inquiries only. Don't go in person unless something literally catches your eye when you're out and about and you might not have seen it online. Sure, go in if you want to, have a face-to-face talk with the letting agencies, see what they can offer you, but online is where it's at. So the two most well-known websites are Zoopla and Rightmove. And all you have to do when you go onto Zoopla and Rightmove is to enter the search criteria that you're looking for, and there will be hundreds and hundreds of properties that come up. But this is London and properties will literally just go like that. I remember when I was searching for a property and I noticed that I would see a property that was listed like 5 hours ago. I would call in and ask to arrange a viewing, and I would be told, oh, sorry, the property has already been let. And I'm like, what? It's only been 5 hours. Are you fucking kidding me? But yes, they do tend to go that fast. The thing with studios is that, you know, they are in abundance. I would say they're fairly easy to get in comparison to a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom, because they are so affordable to make. They're so affordable to maintain as well, so that's why they're in abundance, and that's why they're probably the most common form of accommodation in London. Like, studio flats are so common, but as much as they are common, you know, they're very popular as well. And London has grown and expanded and it's just very busy here. So you can imagine how many people are looking for a studio flat too. So you have to be very quick with this. When you're searching for a property, you have to be very quick with it. Like, you can't waste time. Literally set aside a couple hours every single day, whether it's 2 hours, 3 hours, and just go ahead, make your calls, and set up viewings, because even if you have a viewing, there is no guarantee that you're going to get the property. And before even looking for a property, you should have done your due diligence, and you should know what you can afford and what you can't afford, and what income will pass the referencing checks on the property that you're looking for. So don't just blindly go ahead and start looking at properties that you're interested in and be like, oh, I like that one, that's beautiful, because they may not accept your application, so you could waste your time, right? And I wouldn't want you to waste your time. So find properties that not only fit your requirements, but that will accept you as a potential tenant as well. I think I'll make a separate video on that, because you know, that could be helpful as well. But let's move on to the third option as to how to get a studio flat in London, and that is with the council. Now, this option is long, okay? It's very long. Unless you are in a situation that is dire, okay? You're in a domestic violence situation, there is overcrowding in your property, meaning that there are not enough rooms to house everyone in your household. So you could be sharing with your mum, or your brother could be sharing with your dad, or two siblings could be sharing together. Meanwhile, it's just a 2-bedroom property or a 1-bedroom property, and some people are sleeping in the living room. That's what overcrowding is. So unless you're living in an overcrowded situation, you have health conditions which make living in your current property unsuitable. If you have any of those things, then you are, fortunately, but also unfortunately, because who wants to deal with that kind of stuff, but you're fortunately in a better position than most people, because you can approach your local council or any council that you have a local connection to, and they will assess you, and based on that assessment they will put you into a band. And you have many different bands, and it really varies between the councils, but you could have band A, B, C, D, and the lower band that you're in, the less points that you get, and the points indicate you know, where you are on the housing register to bid for properties. That's essentially how it works with most councils in London. And there are some councils that don't actually have a housing register. For example, Barnet Council, they don't have a housing register at all. Literally, they are more likely to support you with private housing than to give you a council home. Can you imagine? There's like a shortage of council housing in London on a whole, and then when you come to the area of Barnet, there's basically nothing available. You know, there are a few things, but those are reserved for people who truly need it, right? So I would say this option is only for you if you have any medical health condition that is serious, or you're in a situation where you need to move, right? There is no doubt about it. Like, if you are in need of housing, you will get support from the council, but it will take some time. So you have to be patient with this one. But the benefits of a council, I've been saying council house, haven't I, all this time? But the benefits of a studio flat with the council is that it is going to be much cheaper than market rent. You know, it's going to be very affordable. If you are claiming government benefits, it will cover the entire rent, so you won't have to pay anything towards it. But it also depends on your income if you're working as well, so that's also something to take into consideration. And getting a property with the council, again, there is this idea that all council properties are filled with scroungers, chavs, scum, people who are just on the dole, just to be on the dole because they're lazy and they don't want to work. Antisocial behaviour is associated with council flats, and unfortunately a lot of those things, they can actually be true, but at the same time, you know, it doesn't apply to every estate or every property that you come across that is council owned in London. So it's a mixed bag, really. It depends on what area you're in. Obviously, if you're in a rough area, you can imagine the types of people that you'll be sharing a building with. So really keep that in mind. Like, if you want to live with peaceful, quiet people who aren't rough, rowdy, or anything of that nature, then you might want to consider going private. And again, this is just a generalization. It's not to say that everyone who is on government benefits or who's living on a council estate is going to be the same way. But if you're someone who, like I said, you like a peaceful life, then I would say go private. you have much more choice over the area you live in, and also you get to meet the landlord face to face, or the letting agency face to face, and it's a much more personal approach. You know, when you're renting privately and you call in, you're going to be speaking to the landlord or someone who's closely related to them who can get in touch with them. But when you call in and you're renting from the council, you're going to be calling up, waiting in a queue of, I don't know, about 10 people who are also making inquiries, and you're going to have to wait a while. I mean, these are neither negative or positive. It's just however you see it, really. Like, something that works for one person isn't going to work for another person. And I'll use myself as an example. A couple of years ago, I was living in a housing association property, and I've always lived in a housing association property. Like, regardless of where I moved to, it was always a housing association property. And for the first time in my entire life, I moved to a property owned by a private landlord. And I have been here for about, how long has it been? Since 2021, I think. So it's been just under 3 years, and I am ready to move already. Goodness me. Before I moved here, I didn't want to move into a property owned by a private landlord, purely because of my experiences with the housing association were positive. Like, that's what I was used to, and I knew that with a private landlord, they're not going to provide the same services as a housing association, because it's just different. You know, you got a whole team working together to provide housing services, whereas with the private landlord, it's just one person, and you know, they can only do so much as a single person unless they're working as a team with other people. But that brings us on to the last option, which is housing association properties. In the past, I lived in housing association properties for well over 3 years, and my experience with those properties were mostly positive. Of course, there were some negatives, but for the most part, for the overall picture, it was quite positive. So getting a housing association property is kind of similar to getting a council property, but the process might be a little bit quicker. And the difference between a housing association property in comparison to a council property is that council properties are owned by the local authority. That's the main difference. There are a couple of other differences as well and other similarities, but to keep it short and sweet, that's one of the main differences. And a housing association property is owned by a non-profit company that just provides housing for people who, again, need it. So this one is really about need, and there are less options in terms of choice. So you likely won't be able to choose the area, you won't be able to pick out the property that you want for the features that it has. What you're given is what you get, and what you get is what you're given, basically. But if you're just looking for accommodation and you don't really care about all of the details and that kind of stuff, you know, this is a great option, especially if you're on a low income, or you're in a vulnerable situation, or you have a health condition, or again, you're in an overcrowded situation. Like, that was what my situation was. And I think some people actually wanted to know my own personal situation as to how I got a studio flat with my housing association. And just to cut a long story short, it's because that, number one, I was young. I think I was about 20, 21, 19. I can't even remember. It's been a while, but that's where my journey first begun. In my situation, I was living in a property that didn't adequately house myself and my family. So there was overcrowding going on, and I was having to share a bedroom with my mum, which is not something I wanted as someone who was quite independent. Even at that young age, you know, I've always had that independent streak in me. I've always liked my own space, and I'm a very private person. So sharing with anyone, regardless of who they are, is not for me, right? So that was my situation. I was just in an overcrowded family home, and there was, you know, family tension. That's kind of what happens when there's not enough space and there's too many people crammed into a little house. So I wrote a letter and I photocopied it like 50 times. I got my grandparents to sign it, because that's where I was staying at the time, with my grandparents. And I gave that letter to housing associations that seemed decent to me. And I think I must have given it to the Citizen Advice Bureau. Is that what they're called? I can't even remember. This process happened many years ago, so it's a bit fuzzy in my mind. But I remember going to many different places to just hand that letter in to explain my situation. And I just explained my situation from start to finish, very briefly though, because no one wants to be reading a long letter. I just wanted to make my situation clear. And so I didn't have to explain it time and time again. You know, they would be briefed with the letter that I wrote, and then if they had any questions, you know, they would ask me and I could fill them in on those. But yeah, to cut a long story short, I wrote that letter, I sent it around to multiple places. I had meetings at multiple places as well. And then I remember there was a moment where I kind of gave up. I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, this is fucking long, right? It felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. And then I get a call from a housing association that I must have applied to, and they said that they have a property available. And they invited me down to see it, and I took it because the situation that I was in, living at my grandparents', it wasn't great. So I took the first thing that they gave me, and it was a room in a flat share. And I didn't like it there for various reasons. I was there for less than a year. And it was a great experience, you know, because I've never shared with anyone before besides family. So it was an experience, I'll say that. So I then moved to a house share, and that was also unpleasant for multiple reasons. Like, if you've been watching my channel and you've seen some of my previous videos, you know why. I made a series called Housemates. I still haven't finished that series. It's been a while, you know. I'll probably continue it at some point. But yeah, that was unpleasant as well. But the house, let's just focus on the house and the property. It was nice. You know, it was in a nice area, and my room was nice as well. It had enough space. There were 2 bathrooms, 2 kitchens, and yeah, it was overall quite a nice place. There was a little garden as well outside, and it was in a really quiet area, so that ticked all of my boxes. But I was there for about 3 years until I was transferred to my own studio flat. So that was my process, and I didn't really plan it out. That's just the way it happened. But if we're starting from the point where I was in a situation where I needed to move, which is when I moved into that house share, because there was a lot of antisocial behavior that went on there. That is the reason why I was transferred to my own studio flat, because they could see from my case file, same housing association by the way, they could see from my case file that I had dealt with a lot of shit from other tenants, and it was kind of like a last resort thing. Like, I can't share with people who I don't know, who are highly disrespectful and who have issues, and they take them out on other people. I just can't deal with it. Like, no one should have to deal with that. So that's why my housing association at the time moved me to my own studio flat. And it was a really nice flat. Like, if you've seen the video, it was decent. It was small, but you know, I'm only one person. I don't need a whole lot of space, right? And yeah, it was what I needed at the time, especially to just come away from the negative experiences that I had, and to just, you know, chill, ground myself, heal from what went on. But that's essentially how I got my housing association property. So if you're in a similar situation, again, this is literally the same thing that I said at the start of the video regarding getting a council property. But if there is overcrowding going on in your property, you're dealing with domestic violence, antisocial behavior, you have a medical condition, any of those things, you know, if you are in need, you know, things have changed over the years, and I don't think you can straight up approach a housing association. There are a lot of charities and other companies that you can approach directly, but you have to meet their criteria. So you might have to be a certain age. For example, you might have to be between 17 and 25, and there are a lot of charities that will help 17 to 25 year olds, or there are some places that will house people who are 55 and over. It really depends. If any of you are looking for specifics, then I might be able to help on that. So just leave a comment down below and I'll just get back to you. But yeah, with most housing associations, you will need to go to your local authority to register yourself. And I've not been through that process because, like I said, I personally applied directly. But from what I have heard from other people and I have read online, it's basically a case of registering with your local authority, telling them your situation, them assessing you, and then putting you forward to be able to bid on properties. And again, housing association properties are extremely popular. They are in high demand, and there is a shortage of housing, as I'm sure you've heard time and time again. So the wait will be long, but I have the impression that it's not as long as waiting for a council house. You know, I could be wrong, but that is just the impression that I get based off of my own experience and what I have seen with other people. You can also find housing association properties on openrent, and I say this because I literally found one. I'm in the process of moving again, so it's kind of ironic that someone asks this question at this same time where I'm literally looking for a property right now. And I am using Zoopla, openrent, Rightmove, Purple Bricks. I'm basically using everything. I even looked on Gumtree, but I don't like Gumtree because there are some unsavory people on Gumtree, let's just put it that way. There are a lot of scams about. That's another thing that you have to be careful for. There are people who will take advantage of people who are in need of housing, and they might ask for an upfront payment to use their service. So this isn't a payment for a deposit or a security deposit. This is just to use their service. If you ever come across a company that asks that, I would strongly advise you to look elsewhere and don't pay any upfront fees at all. It's just not worth it, you know. Looking for a property and searching with estate agents and letting agents, private landlords, that is free. You don't need to pay some company who promises that, oh, they'll get you a property quick. And this is especially for people who are on low income, right? That's who they're targeting. I've seen those ads on Gumtree and it's just sad. Yeah, it's very sad. And of course, people can run a scam anywhere, but it's much easier to run that scam on Gumtree because it's not really regulated like dedicated property sites such as Zoopla, Rightmove, or openrent or Purple Bricks. Even on openrent, there are some rogue landlords who are doing things that they shouldn't do. So you just got to be vigilant, right? Know what to look out for and don't play into people's scams or, you know, asking for an extortionate amount of money up front. Just don't do it. It's not worth it, you know. You'll eventually find a place. You just have to stay dedicated and persevere and keep on going on, you know. Don't fall in love with properties either. Like when you're searching for a property, especially if you're looking for a private landlord and you see one that you really like and you're like, oh my god, I love the bath, I love the little taps on it, I like the way the door closes. Like that might not be any of you guys, but that is me, right? I have a great eye for architecture and I love property design. So when I come across something that looks beautiful to me, it's aesthetically pleasing, I just light up, right? And I'm like, oh my god, that is gorgeous. Like, I'm like, I love the structure of the stairs. Like that is just so me. But when you're looking for a property to move into and you have a deadline, you cannot be caught up in that shit. If you don't have a deadline, then cool, just take it easy. Yeah, if you're looking for a property quick, you can't get caught up in the details or whatever. You just gotta, like I said, stay proactive and you will eventually find a place. If there is anything at all that I've missed out in this video, or there is something else that you would like me to cover, then feel free to make a comment below and just let me know. Otherwise, I will see you in my next video.